Hello, hello, I'm Dom Kane, and welcome to the very first episode of the Kane Audio podcast. For more information on the podcast or any of our guest interviews, or even just some music production tips and tricks or news, you can head to kaneaudio.com and check out the blog. This month's guest is a man of many talents. He's the owner of Rankin Audio, the record label and the sample library company. He's been known as the dubstep heartthrob High Rankin, and more recently the deep house and techno alias City Riot. He's created comedy sketches for the BBC and had his own comedy radio show with partner James Pryor. Brighton born, but now Berlin based, it is of course Will Rankin. Welcome to the podcast, I guess.
Hi Dom.
Hi.
Thank you. Very nice to finally be here. How are things with you?
They're good. Yeah, I mean, like I said, welcome to the first podcast for Kane Audio, which is a bit hairy, but that's why that's why I invited you.
I really have been holding the whole thing up then, if this is your first one, you've been waiting for me.
It is.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, first of all, how's things in Berlin going?
Things in Berlin are great. The weather is really nice, which actually doesn't make it that inspiring to go into the studio.
No.
But the winter that we just had was particularly bleak. It wasn't particularly cold, didn't snow or rain very much, but it was just grey and ominous for 6 months.
British, basically.
Oh man, yeah. But yeah, now the beautiful sun's out, so it's lots of open air parties and lots of techno in the sun.
Sounds good.
It's nice.
How long have you been there now?
3.5 years.
Is it that long, is it?
Yeah,
right.
Well we did...
So you're basically German now?
Yeah, almost. I don't eat quite enough sauerkraut, but I certainly get grumpy enough with people enough. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, with the whole Berlin thing, since you've been there, you've pretty much changed not only your style of music but your general output as well. Your whole sort of production process and everything with the whole modular synths and everything like that, is that actually because of Berlin? Do you think it's a Berlin cultural thing, or is it just coincidence that these things happened at the same time?
No, I think it is. I think the two certainly feed into each other. I mean, you get a different experience of electronic music in Berlin than you do anywhere else in the world, and particularly in the UK, it is way more centred around bass music, your drum and bass, dubstep, electro, kind of more, just less of the sort of really sort of traditional deeper house techno, particularly techno. They're just. I mean, I don't have an enormous amount of experience of looking for it in the UK, but there was maybe one minimal night in Brighton when I was living there. I'm sure there's more stuff in London, but it really, compared to Berlin, where there's just an infinite amount of different kinds of techno to go to every night.
I was going to say, is it perhaps because it was more sort of shoved in your face in Berlin, you couldn't escape it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. But then also here, there's maybe one dubstep night a month, or probably not even that anymore. There's one regular drum and bass night that actually books sort of bigger acts. So, people like Black Sun Empire, John B, or, Camo and Crooked, that sort of level of acts. I've never seen lineups with Andy C, Friction, and the really big boys here, because it just doesn't, there's just no one seems to be that interested in it. Berlin's love affair with house and techno certainly isn't ending anytime soon.
No.
But it's definitely had a huge influence on my style and my production techniques. People are way more centred around hardware here than they are, well, certainly than the people that I was knocking around with in the UK. Although this is again something that comes with different styles of music. Like for dubstep and drum and bass, it's all about very, very high levels of mix down and also processing going into sounds, which is really, really difficult to do with hardware.
Yeah.
The synth sounds are so complex and layered that doing all that with hardware synths it'd be an absolute nightmare. So this is why plugins seem to be the way forwards with all of that sort of thing, and the constant sort of layering, resampling and processing you just can't really do outside of the box. You kind of can, but it's just very different. So for people making more traditional ends of house and techno, it's way more tracks that are way more vibe orientated rather than being focused around, who can get the loudest mix down or who can get the most ridiculous bass sound.
Do you miss that? Are you still working under the High Rankin name?
I'm not. I haven't given it up. I haven't retired High Rankin. I'm still doing shows as High Rankin, and I absolutely love playing High Rankin shows. I love the energy of playing drum and bass out, and I'm never going to stop doing that.
I was going to say, because it's just such a totally different scene. I mean, if you compare the sort of the High Rankin scene to the City Riot scene, you've almost gone from one extreme to the other. I'm not going to ask you, do you think it's different? Because obviously it is. And I'm not going to ask you which one you prefer, because obviously there will be elements of both. But is there something specific that you miss doing from the I'll call it the UK scene, that you don't find you get over there?
I do really like the energy of the more aggressive end of dance music, but the reason that I kind of got away from it, I think, is because I felt like my own production was stagnating, and I was getting more and more fed up with making a track, being really pleased with it, and then having a listen to, I don't know, a noisier track or something like that, and just realising how far away I was from being able. It's basically mix down. It's like how far away I was, from being able to get a mix down that sounded that good. And it's making the tracks became 10% making a track and 90% mix down, and it was just doing my head in. I just couldn't get stuff to sound the way I, to fall into line with everybody else. And basically, it's a failing on my own part that I just couldn't get my production level up to scratch with everybody else. And I've kind of, if you obviously listen to my back catalogue, a lot of it is more character-based stuff and more ideasy sort of stuff, rather than being known for an intricate level of production ability. And and so I don't know. I'd found the house and techno that is. It's not like you can just you don't need to be able to produce very well to do it. Of course,
no, but it plays to the lo-fi advantages, doesn't it? I think house and techno production, you can, if your sort of high level production skills aren't in the right place, you can take it in an opposite direction and play to the low level skills and use that to your advantage. Whereas, I think I see what you're saying with the dubstep drum and bass sort of scene. It is such a specific high quality of sound design. It's high. Well, I mean, all of it's high quality with house and techno and drum and bass, but it's a different kind of process with drum and bass. It's like, right, everything has to be absolutely as loud as you possibly can, or it's just not going to stand next to any of the big tracks that you're playing. Whereas you're just going for a completely different approach with house and techno. You're not looking to give some brick wall limited block of sound. It's, you're building a track over 8 or 9 minutes. You're not aiming for that one drop and then the next 30 seconds and then a minute later someone's going to have mixed into another track is really, really different. Also, you're working like 55 BPM slower, so there's way more space to in the mix to be able to work with, rather than working at 175 BPM. And so it's just a completely different way of looking at things. It's kind of like, it's a difference between being a photorealism illustrator or doing Jackson Pollock, expressionist art. Yeah, I'm not saying one is like the other, but they're totally different mediums of art within the same, encompassing sphere of the art world. With that, you're by the looks of it mostly using modular synths now. Is that right?
I've got quite a big Euro rack setup now of about 18U, I think, which is sort of 6 rows of your like 19-inch rack. I've also got I've got 4 Electron machines, got the machine drum, analog 4, analog rhythm, and an Octatrack. What else do we have? TR8, which is always woefully neglected. A Minotaur, Moog Minotaur, which is a really nice little analog basic synthesizer, which would be even nicer if the VST that it's supposed to work with actually work properly.
Oh, they never do.
Oh man, got a really great preset. Okay, this is really good. I'll save that. Oh no, it's lost it. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I know when I was working on the Moog Little Fatty, I think it was. Yeah, it was the Little Fatty. And they'd commissioned a company to bring out a VST. I don't know if it ever actually came out. I know it was sort of trickled out in beta form, but it just wouldn't ever communicate. And you know, this is a Moog that is digitally controlled analog signal path, and it just wasn't worth the hassle, really.
No, I know that Electron have been working unbelievably hard on Overbridge, and they'd recently just brought out the public beta, which I tested it out. It's going to be absolutely amazing when it's finished. I was having trouble that the audio every sort of 30 seconds or something would go all bit crushed and weird, and then it would go back to normal. But obviously it's a beta, it's a public beta, so people test it out and send in the bugs, and so they can fix it all. But when it's finished, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be way better than like the Virus VST. Like I've got a little Virus Snow. And when it works, it is amazing. It's kind of like a really, really high maintenance girlfriend that gives you nothing but grief. But
I've heard a lot about the Virus software.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's amazing in other ways. But it is amazing, and like the sounds that you can get out of it. You know, for a digital synth, if you're after sounds for drum and bass, dubstep, techno, the kind of more, darker sort of genres. Yeah. It's just absolutely unrivaled. Way better than VSTs.
So what made you move to the whole sort of modular system? I mean, it's something I've personally tried keeping away from for, the last couple of decades, to be honest, because I know how addictive it is, and, I've lost a lot of friends to modular synthesis. So, what was it that sort of made you make that move? Because, I mean, to be honest, it's a bold move for anyone. But particularly for someone like yourself who's come from that dubstep drum and bass area, you've literally just thrown yourself in the deep end with the whole modular system. How did that even come across? How did that start?
Well, the studio that I have in Berlin, we used to share. I share it with Tigerlight and a producer called Ewan, who's on House music. And we used to share it with a guy called Martin, who one day, he just used to, have a few synths and stuff and everything kind of normal. And then one day I come in and he's got this thing in front of him with all these cables sticking out of it. I was like, what the hell is that? And he's like, hey, Will, I've been down to Schneidersladen and started my first modular rack. And I was like, oh, wow, that looks quite exciting. What the hell does it do? And it just was making noises that sounded like R2-D2 on crack. And I was like, wow, that looks kind of interesting. And then come back the next day and there's like twice as much stuff. I'm like, wow, this is really growing. Yeah, well, I had to try these new things, and this and this and this. So like, okay, a week later, the studio is completely it's just all modular everywhere. The amount, in about 1 week, he bought half the shop. And it was just completely insane. And then he moved into a different studio, kind of down the road. And I've been thinking about it. And I just was looking for a way to get away from staring at a computer. We moved to London a year and a bit ago by accident.
As you do. Yeah, happens all the time.
Yeah, after a couple of weeks we were like, why have we moved here? We have to move back to Berlin immediately. And 2 months later moved back to Berlin. But while we were there, I weirdly got into making clothes and making sweatshirts and things like that, like actually buying the fabric and cutting the patterns and sewing stuff together.
Again, as you do.
Yeah, as you do. But got really, really into the sort of hands-on element of it, and particularly not looking at doing something creative that wasn't staring at a computer screen.
Okay.
Because I was just also with running Rankin Audio and constantly having to do sort of the administration side of that, I was finding it difficult to separate the two. I would be halfway through making a tune, then I'd go and check some emails, get bogged down with something, with something else, and found it very difficult to get into a flow. But if you don't even have a computer on, there's kind of a lot less to distract you. So when I came back, I kind of, this modular stuff does look quite interesting. Or maybe go to the shop and see how much it's going to cost to, get something that will actually make some noise. About €1,000 just to get something that will make some noise. So you've got like your MIDI to CV interface, which is then going into an oscillator, which then you've got to take the gate into an envelope generator, which then goes into a filter, and then a VCA to do your volume envelopes, and then to an output. And then you've got to get the case and your power system, which can cost you about €300. And it's just ridiculous. And then you've just got this big case with only about 5 modules in it. You're like, I suppose we should just sort of get some more, fill up the case. Can't have all these holes in it.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than seeing an empty rack.
I know, it's terrible. And then before you know it, you're spending all your time looking at modules on the internet, spending your money on modules, and probably doing more of that than actually playing with it. So it was getting kind of ridiculous. And I was like, right, I have to. I was using it to kind of. It's quite difficult to just use it to make a track with. There's lots of different ways you can do it. I mean, you could just make a patch and then develop that into a track. Or what I've done more is kind of make mini sample packs for yourself.
Yeah.
And then just sit down on Ableton and work it into something. Or
I like that as a process for production. I know I've changed mine a lot over the last couple of years. I think it was about 3 years ago when the whole quote unquote EDM thing kicked off. I sort of sat back and went, fuck this, I don't want to do this anymore. And as part of that, I don't think I released a track for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And one of the reasons for that was I'd actually got bored of the whole process of making music. It seemed just somewhat mundane. I just sort of fell back to sound design and just enjoying using hardware. And that eventually, I'm now back into producing and enjoying it again because my production process has completely changed, and I barely touch anything in the box now. And I really enjoy being able to make a sound and then make a loop out of that sound, record that loop in, and then lose that patch for life. And I just find it so much more liberating being able to just never access that patch again. And if, I might listen to the track a week later and go, I wish I, done X, Y, and Z to this bass line or whatever. And it makes it more fun because if I want to do X, Y, and Z to that bass line, I can just make a new one, and you're not just constantly opening old projects and old files and what have you. Do you find that it to be the same with the whole modular experience? And do you find that's one of the things that keeps you in there?
Totally. This is actually a really large part of it. Like when making tracks before, just endlessly tweaking stuff, retweaking stuff. For like a synth noise or something, and you go through it once and and I'll go back and tweak that a bit more. Oh, maybe was the first bit better? I don't know. And then you can tweak stuff forever. Like there's always a potential you might get something better out of it. But if you just record one thing in and then you change everything and you can't get it back. Like, with your modular stuff, you can never save a preset. Once you've changed one thing, you will never ever get it back to how it was. That's it. And when you start repatching stuff, so I was doing like kind of recording 2 or 3 minutes of the same loop and just like, messing around with everything to make all these different little modulations and so on and so forth, and then chopping them up and rearranging them. And it's a really, really nice way to work than to just like putting some MIDI in with a VST synth and going, oh, that's all right, and then do some automation. Am I happy with that automation? And never really quite being happy with it. Well, certainly for me anyway.
Infinitely tweaking that red line of automation when exactly. Actually all you could do is just hit record and turn the knob yourself, You're sort of doing it by ear rather than by eyes.
Also, I don't know, nowadays stuff just seems so throwaway, like in the music scene particularly.
Yeah.
Oh, I've made a track, I just put it up, free download, here it is, blah, blah, blah. 2 minutes later, it's forgotten.
Yeah.
I'm not cussing free downloads by any stretch of the imagination. The Rainmaker was a free download label for a while, and so on and so forth. It's totally fine, but stuff has a tendency to just be there on SoundCloud for a couple of weeks, getting some plays, and then it's just disappeared forever. Everything's very throwaway, and people are bombarded with so much content every day. It's nice to just like, all right, I've made this bass line, right, that's fixed there, that's there now, that's permanent.
Yeah.
And you can't go and fuck with it again.
How does that sort of transfer to the live stuff? Because you're now doing, I noticed the other night, you had a live modular gig.
Mm-hmm.
How did it go, by the way?
It went really, really well. Like, we managed to balance very high levels of geekery with a really good dance floor, which was exactly what I wanted for the night.
That's a rare thing to see.
I know. Because with the sort of modular live things that I've been to, they've been very, very self-indulgent. You're much more West Coast synthesis kind of.
Well, I mean, the whole modular synth thing, I've always sort of referred to as musical masturbation. It's.
Oh yeah, totally. But I wanted to go the opposite way. I wanted to make dance floor stuff with the modular, with live.
So how do you do that? How do you sit there with a rack of modular gear and plan ahead?
Well, yeah, you don't really. There's 2 of us. I've been doing it with a guy called Milton, who also has a modular system. Then I have my system, and then I also cheat a little bit by having an analog rhythm and then using an octatrack just for an extra little bit of processing, and for a couple literally minimal samples of occasionally things like pads and stuff that are just a bit of a pain to get out of the modular, right? Particularly anything polyphonic, like anything chord based, is just a nightmare to get out of. You just need loads of oscillators, which when they're costing like 300 quid each, just, you have to be a bit sparing with these things. What is really, really nice is also I just over the last 2 or 3 years of my production, I've been through such a transition, and also just making stuff, not being happy with it, coming back to it a year later thinking, maybe there was something there, don't know, and just never, and honestly, I've got so much stuff that is almost finished that I'm just kind of having crises of confidence about. And what I really like about the live thing is, well, you're just pumping it out, and people are there and they're listening to it and they're having a great time, and it sounds great in the club. If you were pumping that same thing out in the studio, you'd be endlessly going, I don't know, is that hi-hat quite right? Should I be EQing that hi-hat a little bit more?
Yeah.
Whereas, it sounds great in the club, and, people just hear it, and then it all moves on. It's kind of like you can just get away with a lot more in the club. And whereas, if you're just sat there staring at your computer screen, you could just be endlessly tweaking every sound and it not really making any difference to the actual track. It's all just subjective opinion. And so you can just, I don't know, it's just a very different way of looking at it. Plus also that live improvised set, you're never going to be able to play any of that again. Like, it's just, that was it.
Are you recording these shows?
Yeah. We've got a recording I'm going to post up later today of
great.
My set, mine and Milton's set. Also, Dubka's set is on, although his battery died for his recorder after half an hour, so there's only half an hour of it.
Right.
And ZVK's set is up on Mixcloud already. I'll do a big post about it on the City Riot page. But yeah, I mean, that music's never ever going to be played again. It's not just like hearing a DJ play a load of records in the club that some you've already heard, some you could then find out what they were. That only exists there.
Do you find or are you planning to be able to let's say, for example, you made a studio track doing the modular thing, and that track became your signature track. It became a huge hit. Are you in a position where you think you'd be able to then replicate that as a live version?
It depends on how it was made, really. Whether or not with the sequence of notes and sequences in it, how that was sequenced, whether or not it was, sequenced with one of the modular sequences, or whether or not it was like MIDI coming out of the octa track or whatever into it. That can be saved very easily. I mean, if it's sequenced with like the Make Noise Rene or something, it's really, really difficult to get stuff back after you've changed all the settings.
I know. I think it's James Holden uses Max for Live with his modular show, and he's actually ended up using digital oscillators because he sort of worked out, well, a saw wave is a saw wave no matter where it's coming from, and to get that sort of accuracy.
Also, if you're in a really hot club, your analog oscillators will have a tendency to start going a bit crazy, and the tracking can go off and everything goes out of key, which is obviously a bit of a nightmare. So I've got mainly digital oscillators in my system. But
yeah, it seems to be the way, I think, with a lot of the live modular stuff now. A lot of people seem to be sort of running digital VCOs and then passing that through the modular rig.
Yeah, totally. I mean, also, if you talk to people in the modular scene, it from the outside looking in, it looks like a load of like really hardcore analog purists, but it's not the case at all. Like, some of the digital oscillators out there are amazing, like the mutable instruments ones like Braids or the Morphing Terrarium, the synthesis technology one. I mean, it's a wily dog that is very difficult to control sometimes, but they just sound out of this world. And I mean, if you're looking for really just pure analog kind of wanton stuff, then it's all there for the taking. But if it sounds good, it sounds good. It doesn't matter where it's coming from, and that seems to be the general consensus in the community.
Yeah. So, I mean, does this? With your production process and your workflow now, you're basically trying to steer away from computers, I guess.
Yeah, I'm looking to kind of start doing some tracks which are 6 or 7 minute long live performances that are recorded multi-track, so I can make sure they're mixed properly.
Yeah.
But basically, that being it, one take.
Yeah, funnily enough, I'm bidding on a reel-to-reel tape machine at the moment for similar reasons.
Yeah, nice.
I sort of, again, like I was saying earlier on with using predominantly hardware, I sort of came to the conclusion, I wonder what it'd be like just without a computer at all.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting idea. I mean, there's sort of various different approaches.
So do you find this process has affected the output of Rankin Audio as a sample library label? Has there been an impact on the sort of the workflow for that?
Well, I don't make that many of the packs anymore for Rankin Audio. I've got about 6 or 7 sound designers sort of worldwide that work on them.
Yeah.
So it hasn't, to be honest. This is more something that I'm kind of keeping as just for my stuff at the moment.
Yeah.
I think we might do some modular packs, see what the demand is like.
I was going to say, I mean, I would have thought there'd be a huge call for modular packs.
Well, I think the people that are really into it are just getting themselves modulars.
True.
And I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I mean, we'll definitely be doing some. I mean, we are incorporating a lot more hardware into the packs, like particularly for the house stuff. The more deeper end of things. I'm using things like Poly 6, although actually that's digital. But it has that really nice classic old house sort of sound for pads and chords and things like that. And also using the modular in a more basic sense of just using some of the analog oscillators to make really nice, rich warm bass sounds.
Yeah.
Which, you know, they're not like, wow, that sound is, you know, whoa, I haven't heard it before. But, you know, they're very, you know, kind of generic, really sounding, but just really, you know, warm and fat and nice. And when, you know, when it's not about who can make the most ridiculous bass noise, it's just, you know, wanting to get a really nice, warm, organic sound into your track.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Do you have a particular workflow when it comes to sound design for sample library stuff? Do you tend to start with a certain project template or a specific synth or a specific DAW or what?
When I do the libraries, I've been doing some other ones recently, not for Rankin Audio, but yeah, that I've been doing all myself. And basically, the way I work is, well, I work in Ableton, and I work standing up, and I make mini tracks.
Yeah.
So I make sort of 30-second long tracks. So, you know, you get everything, you know, build the drum loop from scratch, build a bass line, build, you know, the synths that then go over the top of it. So everything fits together really nicely and works together really well.
Yeah.
I think that's very important for a sample pack because... And also something you have to realise when you're making a pack is that a really, really good loop might sound really great, but it might be really difficult to use.
Yeah.
Because you actually, things have to be a little bit more understated sometimes so that they can be layered up and fit in with other stuff.
Yeah.
If you've just got some huge blasting, like, you know, synth riff that's just taking up everything, that's all right if you want to use it just, you know, just there, like as a loop and, you know, but it's really, really difficult to sort of weave it in and out of a track. So you have to look much more towards what's going to be really usable for your customers, rather than what, you know, just sounds great as a loop on its own. So the way I found to do that is making mini tracks that have got about 7 or 8 different layers to them.
Yeah.
That all work nicely together and are all in a certain key, and then exporting all the individual loops and going and making another one. So I kind of end up at the end of a pack with, like, I don't know, 10 or 12 of these micro tracks, which then end up making up the demo.
Yeah.
And it just seems to work quite nicely like that. And I've also, the packs that I've been making, I've been basically making packs for myself that I want to use in my own production. And then...
it's something I've never actually done myself. I've spent the last 10 years making loops, packs and sample libraries for other people. And I remember watching Noisia doing their producer session with Future Music Mag. And they sort of explained that they spent a day going through bassline sounds and then another day going through snare drum sounds and just building up a stock library that would just become a library for that specific project. And I just remember thinking, that's genius. That's exactly how I should do it. But I've never done it. Is that something you do a lot of for yourself then now?
It's definitely something that I'm doing a lot more of now, particularly with taking it from a hardware approach. Because, you know, you can just, you know, if you're starting out of the modular, you can just record yourself jamming for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then go through and chop it all up and go, all right, well, there's 10 loops out of this or something. Obviously, if you just chop the whole thing into 16-bar loops, you're just going to have a whole load that sound the same. But if you're jumping ahead a minute or so at a time, then they're completely different. As long as you stay in the same key and the same tempo, it's fine.
Do you find
pick out all the best ones?
Do you find there are any sort of VSTs or digital synths that you can't really live without when it comes to producing a track?
The not really, but the thing that I use the most is the Native Instruments Transient Master.
Okay.
It's just, I mean, it's only 3 knobs. It's super simple: attack, decay, and a gain. I've also used it sometimes on the mastered channel because it limits everything at 0, and then when you ram the gain right up, it actually works really, really nicely as a limiter, particularly for drum and bass.
Yeah, I like that. I've never thought of doing that.
Let me just look through my actual VSTs that I have here. I use Synth Master a lot.
Oh, right, okay.
Particularly for making packs, like deep housey sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's really good synth.
It is. It's one I never really got my head into on a deep level, but I think I might have made some presets for that when it first came out. And I know I definitely beta tested it, but I'll be honest, I haven't used it for a long time. I'll have to dig it out again.
Yeah, I bought it with the the full library of every preset ever made for it, and it's ridiculous. There's thousands of the sods, but yeah, going through, finding something nice, tweaking it, getting more into it. Yeah, it's just the sound that comes out of it is really, really nice. The one that I've been meaning to get into for ages but haven't is Serum.
Yeah, again, I was involved in the sort of development of that one.
It's what I've heard is really, really nice. Also,
it's a beast. It's an absolute beast. The fact that you can not only change the wavetable but essentially reshape the wavetables as well.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with wavetables on almost a 3D level.
Nice.
So yeah, it's got some really clever stuff in there.
There's a few modules like that. I think the Harvestman Piston Honda does that, and also there's this Morphing Terrarium digital wavetable synth that I've got that's got hundreds and hundreds of wavetables that it scans through, kind of a little bit like the way Massive does.
Yeah.
That then you can CV input, and it's very good for making noises that go if you like that sort of thing.
Yeah, I've got a Kima Pacarana on its way, which is something I'm going to start getting my head into.
What's that?
It's it's a sound design tool. It's basically the UAD of sound design.
Okay.
So it's 19-inch rack mount unit. It needs its own audio interface, and I guess it's sort of similar to Max MSP in terms of object-based language.
Right.
And yeah, I mean it's behind a lot of the sound effects of Star Wars, WALL-E. It's the voice of WALL-E.
Oh right.
And it's so you can do some pretty clever stuff, like you can insert an audio sample and read a spectrum analysis or a formant analysis using FFT, and then you can apply that formant or that spectrum onto an entirely separate audio sample. So that's how they did the WALL-E voice. I think they mixed the formant of, was it a car engine or something along those lines, and
Nice.
they placed it on top of a voice basically, and then repitched it in real time.
Is that kind of how a vocoder works?
Yeah, similar. But it's obviously I guess it is with a vocoder. It'll take the formant from one and apply it to a new audio input. But it just does it on a whole different scale, basically. So
does it have its own language or what?
Yeah, it's got its own language. It's it comes with its own software called the Kima. And yeah, you should Google it if you can find much on it. It's it seems like it's a bit of a sort of a secretive, like the Masons sort of. It's just a weird thing, but yeah, I mean
That's
they're
quite
not
interesting.
cheap.
I've been trying to learn a bit of code recently with the intention of getting some Arduino stuff or some Raspberry Pi stuff to make some little just DIY modules.
Yeah.
Because there's a few out already. There's this company called Snazzy Effects that have a module called Ardcore, which is an Arduino thing, and you can just reprogram it to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
It's got some CV ins and outs and some knobs. The only problem with it is whoever designs the faceplates of their modules needs to be taken outside and shot. But honestly, it's just the most ghastly things. I'm sure they're amazing, but like, yeah, like this is the thing with modular stuff. Like there's a design thing, and like having a really nice rack full of really beautiful looking modules, it is a really big part of it. Like,
yeah, I suppose it brings in a whole new
materialistic
level of subjectivity, I suppose, into equipment.
Yeah, but I mean, I just wouldn't buy one of their modules because they just look so ghastly. Like, honestly, Google them, you're just like, whoa, looks like a teenage boy that's like doodling on his, exercise. But Sorry if they haven't listened to this. Someone's got to tell them.
So what door are you on now? Because am I right in thinking you were beta testing Bitwig at one point, weren't you?
No, I did try to get on the list, but I don't know. They obviously, they hate me, presumably.
I'm surprised you should have pulled some Berlin strings. Dom's based. I think he's in Berlin.
I think they all are. Yeah.
Funnily enough, I've got him on this podcast in a couple of episodes' time.
Nice.
So I'll put in a good word for you.
I'm just on Ableton. I have been since I moved over onto a Mac about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I was FL Studio before, and when finally the Mac version comes out, I'll certainly give it a try because I loved FL Studio, but I just hated PCs.
Right.
And so move on to a Mac, and you can use it with Boot Camp and so on, but it's just a pain in the ass.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to routing audio.
Yeah, plus Ableton just does everything I want it to be able to do. There's not really anything that that it does that I don't want. Plus Push is amazing.
Are you on Push? Are you?
Yeah, it's genius for sample packs. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I again, it's one of those things I keep looking at, going, yeah, I could do with one of them, and then I just think, maybe not.
It's just got some really nice stuff, like the melodic step sequencer in it is really good. The way you can lock it to certain keys to just sort of jam stuff out, and then you have like the step sequencing for a drum rack, and it's occasionally it's a pain in the arse, and sometimes it does. There's some irritating menu diving that you have to do stuff, but you've got basically every function of Ableton within this.
Yeah, that was my issue, and I think that's probably what puts me off the Ableton Push. Is I've got the Native Instruments machine.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, the version 2 is far more superior, but when I first got it, I had the intent of doing some live stuff with it when I was doing my laptop setup, and I just found it was just way too German in the menu system. It was I felt like I was applying for a government grant or something every time I wanted to change the tempo or do something really simple. It was just the least intuitive menu system I've ever found.
I actually went on a 2-day course to learn the first machine software.
Really?
And actually, learnt it. By the end of the second day, was just like all over it. Amazing! This is really cool. Yeah. Never touched it again. Literally, for no reason. Just like I got back, and then I don't know. I had some work that I had to do, and then it just sort of sat there. And then I'd had the thing for about 3 years, and only ever used it live, just purely as a trigger pad.
Yeah.
And then
same here.
Actually, then learnt it, and then still never quite got around to it.
Yeah, I just never found I could learn it really. I just felt the menu system and everything seemed to even dealing with the different screens and your what I can only call a session view and a timeline view.
Yeah.
These things become so ingrained with whether it be Ableton or Bitwig or Logic or whatever it is you use, that you're so used to having that as your DAW. Mm-hmm. I just felt like using Machine was using a whole new DAW that didn't quite match what I'd been used to.
Yeah, basically. Although, the thing that actually sort of turned me off a little bit about it was how limited the arrange view was. But they seem to have sorted that out a lot in the second version. Yeah,
it is a lot better on the second version, I'll give it that.
It had a feeling of very early Fruity Loops.
Yeah. I mean, I struggle moving from one DAW to another. I was using Ableton. Well, I obviously started on the Atari, and that was an easy move to Cubase on the PC. And then, but I remember moving from Cubase to Ableton, nearly 10 years ago. And that, it took me probably 6 months of working every day before I actually managed to get a finished track that I was happy with.
Really?
I just really struggle with it. And Ableton, I found, was just so intuitive from day one. But it still took me that long to change. And now even, my transition is moving from Ableton into Bitwig. and there are still every now and then I hit a bit of a mental block with stuff like that. So I really struggled with the machine. So I think that's probably the thing that's put me off getting the Ableton Push for so long.
Yeah. Occasionally I get a bit frustrated with the sound that comes out of Ableton. I mean, obviously, an audio engine is a black and white thing, but the summing algorithms for combining all the channels together are going to be different. And, there's a lot to... I don't know, it just feels sometimes like Logic, if you bounce all your stems out of Ableton individually, put them into Logic, do your mix down and bounce it out, for some reason it ends up sounding better than if you just do the mix down in Ableton. I don't know if you've ever had any experience of this.
Well, I've seen a few people try and do tests. I'm not convinced that I've ever seen a test that had accurate results or was put through decent conditions, but I kind of agree but kind of disagree. I think a lot of it comes down to a subjective thing, really. I've always done my mixdowns in Pro Tools. No matter what DAW I've used, I've always done mixdowns in Pro Tools. But actually that wasn't because of the audio engine or the summing capabilities. I mean, at the end of the day, if you've got a solid mix, you've got a solid mix,
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the things that people quite often forget is really that I'm sure every DAW has its little nuances, but when you're adding it up to, 30, 40, 50 channels of sound and, it's really not going to make much of an impact. But for me personally, the reason I separated my production process and my mix process was just a mental thing. I just found if I was doing my mix down in Ableton, where I'd produced the track, while I was listening back to it, I'd end up tweaking things. I'd end up just going, I want to change that, or whatever. Something wasn't quite right on the sound design level. And then you find you're just going back and forth all the time. So what I would do is I would just make my entire track in Ableton and then go, right, this is it. I'm drawing a line here, bounce all the stems out, bring them up in Pro Tools and just treat the mix as a mix and sort of treat it as though I'm doing a mix down for a client. Rather than one for myself.
That's a very good way of looking at it, actually. I think I might try and start doing that because, I do end up getting lost in the never-ending cycle of tweaking.
Yeah, and you've got all that automation in front of you, and you can see it. And I find we as humans, we're kind of weak when it comes to our eyes. Our eyes do everything for us. They taste, they hear, they do all sorts. And I think if you're looking at your Ableton project in front of you and you've got all those beautiful red lines and you can see when your filter is about to open up or close down or whatever it's going to do, you can see all the automation going on and you kind of stop listening properly. You're just looking at the red line and you're watching the arrow follow across it, and you know what's coming up. Whereas if you bounce it all down as audio stems, I mean, bring it into the same DAW if you want, but just treat it as an entirely different project for the mixdown.
Yeah.
I just find you tend to use your ears a bit more then.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, stuff always sounds different when you turn your screen off.
Yeah,
I never listen to it, so I guess it's the same sort of principle, really.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, well, there we go.
How about that?
So, closing this up, I'm going to ask one question to every person I have on this show, and that question is, if you could have one piece of technology invented for you, what would it be and why?
Oh, God. I wish I'd have known that before so I could have a bit more of a think about it. I would really, really like some sort of... I guess it would be like a dedicated hardware platform for doing my live show.
In what way?
So basically, it would be kind of like, Roland brought out that new mixer. It's like a performance mixer that they want you to plug in your TR8 and your TB3 and other stuff into.
I haven't seen that, but...
Yeah, basically, it's like an 8-channel mixer or something that's got like a step sequencer and for effects and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
it was like, oh wow, that looks like it's going to be really good. Oh no, it's not, because you can only have like 3 audio inputs, and then it wants you to just do USB inputs from all their gear.
Oh, right.
It's like, So if I have some sort of combination of an 8-channel Pioneer DJ mixer, so like take the DJM 900,
Yeah.
give it 8 channels, so you've got all that filter on each channel, and the effects and faders of each channel. Then some kind of step sequencer for making sequences on the fly. So it would be something that would be...
Something that sort of resembles an 808 sequencer or something.
It would be, I think, a little bit more like a mono me.
Okay.
You know, so it's you've got it locked to a key, and then it runs along, and then depending on how high or low you put you press the button on it, it will be how high or low the note will be. So you can kind of go dum dum dum, press them up and down all the way along, and it'll go along and it'll play all the notes in the right key. And then you could flick between. You could have maybe 4 or 5 of those that you could press a button and it will switch to a different sequence. And then maybe a couple more which would be for drums. You could kind of have the whole thing all integrated into one system, and then you can select between different effects to apply to different channels and that sort of thing.
I like
It'd be nice.
I like it. So it's like a hardware multi-track DAW type thing.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, for specifically dedicated for live performance.
I like it.
Yeah, be nice. Find me someone that'll make me it.
Kickstarter.
Yeah, just imagine the kind of ridiculous drawings of this thing. Right, well, and then it does this, and it's got these huge levers on the side, and steam comes out.
I need more LEDs.
Just more, and it levitates. That bastard thing levitates, so you can run about on stage with it. But, yeah, we need hoverboard technology.
And on that note,
yeah. There you go. Well, thank you for having me, Dom.
thanks for joining me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime. Apart from maybe next time not having it take about 3 months to actually get around to doing it.
Yeah, well, these things happen, like I say. But no, it's been great.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm really chuffed with that.
Cool.
Awesome, and I can stop recording.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to everyone who tuned in for this, and if you'd like more information on the podcast or any of our guest interviews, or even just some music production tips and tricks or news, you can head to kaneaudio.com and check out the blog.